Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. King County Executive Girmay Zahilay will give the state of the county today. I sat down with him last Saturday for a live interview at the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival. We talked about some of the issues facing King County and how he plans to address them. You'll hear that conversation in a minute, but first, let's get you caught up. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates will testify today before the House Oversight Committee about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. His testimony will happen behind closed doors. The Wall Street Journal reports Gates struck a deal with the committee to not appear on camera for the deposition. Gates had admitted that he associated with Jeffrey Epstein, but has said he did nothing illegal and had no knowledge of Epstein's crimes. The scenic North Cascades Highway will open June 19th, the latest opening since 1974. State crews are nearly done repairing and repaving a stretch of highway that was severely damaged during the December flooding and damaged again after a rock slide in March. The 26-mile stretch of highway between Diablo Lake and Porcupine Creek closes each winter. And a floating stage where people can watch the World Cup matches opens tomorrow on the Seattle waterfront. The Seattle Sounders and Rain, who built it, are calling it a first-of-its-kind floating mini-pitch. It has a huge video screen and other amenities where fans can watch the matches. You'll have to buy a ticket to board. There's space for 500 people. Meanwhile, the city will have fan zones where you can watch for free, including at Seattle Center and Pacific Place. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Girmay Zahilay has been King County Executive for a little over 6 months. Today, he'll give the State of the County address. He'll likely address some recent news we've covered on this show, things like a major realignment for regional transit, a damaging audit from the Department of Community and Human Services, which found the county exposed itself to significant financial risk, and calls to dissolve the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. I asked about all this and more live at the Cascade Ideas Festival last week. Here's that conversation. Executive Zahilay, thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Cascade PBS. Thank you, Trisha. Good to see you.
All right. As county executive, you're now responsible for agencies like the Department of Community and Human Resources and the Regional Homelessness Authority, both charged with providing services to some of the county's most vulnerable people. You were on the county council and the budget chair when many of the funding decisions for these programs were made, and we're talking about billions of dollars in budget. In hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, absolutely. During the pandemic, King County received a lot of new resources from the federal government to deal with all the new challenges that we were dealing with. And the executive, the county council members, a lot of people out in the community at the time wanted us to work with smaller organizations that could reach populations that were more vulnerable and had less access to government, less access to big organizations. So many of us made intentional decisions to lower barriers so smaller organizations could get access to grants. And as we got all those new resources and lowered barriers so smaller organizations could, we did not keep the oversight and financial control infrastructure to keep pace with the volume of grants that were going out. And so absolutely, we should have done a better job of having financial controls, doing site visits. We didn't have enough staff to manage the level of growth that happened in the grant-making departments. And so there's a lot that should have changed, and right now we are doing that work to make those changes, and I'm proud to share that our DCHS department is on track to meet all 10 of the audit recommendations. This is a very good organization, and we've also done a lot of work to go above and beyond what the audit even calls for.
Yeah, the auditors said that there are new trainings and protocols and oversight. They say they've been encouraged by that. How and when will the county know if these things are working, though?
I think they're working now. For our administration, which just started 6 months ago, we want us to be a high-performing organization that is accountable, that is transparent, that is producing the results that we all need to see. And so the first thing I did, one of my very first executive orders, was installing an internal audit director who not only responds to the independent auditors' audits, but proactively looks across all of our departments to assess risks, to find issues, to change systems that are not producing the results that we want to see. For the first time in history, we're doing what's called base budgeting. So in usual years in the past, we just from one budget season to the next roll over like 90 to 95% of the budget. For the first time in history, we're building our budgets from the ground up to see what's working, what's not working, and make sure we're giving you exactly what your tax dollars need to give you.
I'm glad you brought up the auditor position. The county will need to staff up to fill all these positions needed to satisfy the auditor's findings and some of the goals you've laid out in your recent executive order. Will the county have enough money to make these changes considering the significant financial challenges you're expecting over the next 5 years?
The short answer is it's a trade-off, right? These are the issues that we always have to navigate. Do you want more resources for direct services, or do you want more resources for infrastructure and oversight? Those are the trade-offs we make. Anytime we put out a levy, for example, to raise revenues, we have to decide what percentage of those revenues coming in are going to go to administration and oversight. There are trade-offs. So the more money you put into the oversight infrastructure, the less you have for direct services, and we have to decide where that balance is.
All right, let's move on. King County Regional Homelessness Authority is trying to pull itself together after a recent audit found overspending and mismanagement, including $13 million in public funding unaccounted for. This is a 6-year-old agency intended to coordinate countywide response to homelessness. Executive Zahilay, you sit on the agency's board, and so does Katie Wilson. Last month, the agency CEO, Kelly Kinnison, said there are new controls in place that will ensure sustained compliance, transparency, and accountability. Help people understand what the agency has accomplished over the past 6 years.
When the agency started, the goal was to regionalize our homelessness response system. So put all of the contracts, all of the data, all of the work under one roof between all the different jurisdictions that are doing this separately. So if you're a service provider who goes out there and helps people who are unhoused, instead of having to respond to many different contracts for their tracking and reporting requirements, you have one entity that you have to respond to. And the goal was to find efficiencies in that way and to eliminate bureaucratic redundancy. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. If you look at the budgets, the overhead is actually more from this entity than it was when it was fragmented. So that's one problem. Another problem is the goal of having it be a regional entity where all the 39 different cities are putting money into it. That never happened. So mostly King County and Seattle are the only two entities, with a few exceptions here and there. Another issue is that the goal was to separate this entity from politicians who might make political decisions rather than what's best for the people who are unhoused. But I think we all know that this is a very politicized organization, so you can't really escape the politics. And it's probably reducing accountability for some politicians as well. So in a lot of key ways, it's not meeting its objectives. And then you add on top of that all of the financial mismanagement issues that we heard about. But to answer your question, what has it accomplished? Absolutely, it has accomplished bringing together those contracts into one place. So now if you're a service provider, you're mostly responding to KCRHA rather than King County and Seattle and Bellevue or whoever else is participating in this agency.
Both you and Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson will be reporting to your councils August 1st around that time about progress and ideas about whether the KCRHA should be restructured, continue as it is, or dissolved. What is your take on this right now? Is it prudent to keep this agency together?
Not as it is, not as structured. The status quo is unacceptable. I think for the many of the reasons that I just described, we have to do better. Homelessness, anytime you do polling in King County, this is by far the number one issue on people's minds. Both homelessness and the cost of housing, which we know are together related, and we have to do better. And so we're coming together to make short-term and long-term recommendations on how we stabilize the organization in the short term. And then we all have to come together as a region and decide what the next chapter is going to look like. What I don't think we should do is go back to the old system where everybody is just doing their own thing in different places.
The city of Seattle recently made its own proposals about how it plans to handle some homelessness in the short term. They're setting up shelter units in anticipation of the World Cup. What does it say that Mayor Wilson is taking this parallel approach? Isn't this work that the KCRHA should be doing?
So I think you'll have to ask her that question. But in my view, I think what she is trying to do is set up roofs over people's heads as quickly as possible. I know that there are trade-offs when we go for things that are really good, like permanent supportive housing, that take a lot of time to set up. We still need permanent supportive housing, but she is probably feeling like there are a lot of people outside right now, and setting up tiny house villages is a very relatively quicker and more cost efficient way of just dealing with the crisis that's outside. I feel similarly too, which is why we have made our commitment of setting up 500 units in 500 days from the time that we announced it. We're getting ready to announce one of our first set that's close to 100 units in the Seattle area. We'll announce that on Wednesday. But I agree, we need to set up as many roofs over people's heads as possible, while also in parallel understanding that stuff like permanent supportive housing, stuff like crisis care centers, those are all needed and part of the equation as well.
You're considering a countywide affordable housing levy that could go before voters as early as 2027. Can you say more about that?
Well, so I announced at the end of March, as part of my Breaking the Cycle initiative, those 500 units in 500 days, but also exploring the first ever countywide housing levy, which would raise tremendous resources for every type of affordable housing you can think of, from tiny house villages to permanent supportive housing, all the way up to home ownership. But I didn't come out and say we are doing this, because I think there's a lot of public trust building that needs to happen first. So we need to figure out, KCRHA, I want to show you all that we are excellent stewards of your public funds before I go out and say we're asking you for another levy. And so this task force that I brought together is just going to analyze what we need and whether they will recommend that we go for it at this time. But if the question is, do we need these resources? Yes. And we need to be accountable with the public's dollars.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough pitch. When will you know if you make that pitch? Because I would imagine you use the term tax sensitivity.
That is a good point that I didn't mention. I have not seen the level of tax sensitivity that our community is experiencing right now since my time in public office. I can't open my social media without seeing people from all political stripes, not just conservatives or moderates, everyone saying my taxes are too high, I can't afford to live here. And so that's why I'm trying to be very cautious about conversations like this. But when will we know? I'm asking for a report by the end of this year from this steering committee that I'm bringing together, and they will let me know. At the same time, I want to show you all that DCHS, that faced all of these issues, is now an excellent organization that has met all of their audit requirements and gone above and beyond. I want to show you that KCRHA, the next chapter, is something that we all can be proud of. And at that point, I want to show you should have confidence in our ability to manage these resources and deliver at the end of the day for the people who are most vulnerable and living out in the streets.
This all happened on former King County Executive Dow Constantine's watch. He is now CEO of Sound Transit. Regarding the audits and fiscal mismanagement, as far as I know, he has not said anything about this since leaving office. Do you think it might be helpful if he commented? Would you like him to?
He's in a new role now. He's not a politician anymore, so I don't expect that he has the same freedom to comment on politics the way he used to.
Have you spoken with him about the audits?
No, not about the audits, but I talk to him very regularly about Sound Transit.
Well, good, we're moving on to that. Sound Transit Board had to make some big decisions recently about a $35 billion projected shortfall. The Ballard line was put on ice, which was tough for the neighborhood and for voters of ST3, a series of tax hikes in 2016. One of the key promises of ST3 was the Ballard extension. Did that extension take the hit for the rest of the system?
Not for the rest of the system, but it did take a hit. So this is one of the points that I want to bring up, is that Sound Transit was facing a $35 billion deficit. That is a deficit that's on a scale that's hard even to imagine. King County's annual budget is about $10 billion. That means if I slashed your entire regional government's budget for 3 whole years, that wouldn't even be enough to meet this type of debt, just to give you a sense of the scale. So of course, it was going to require difficult decisions to close that gap. And at the same time, it's not as simple as there's one bank account and you figure out how to apportion that bank account to different parts of the region. So some commentators have been saying, why did Pierce County and Snohomish County get their stations but not Ballard? Fair question to be frustrated about, but you can't use resources from Snohomish County and Pierce County to build Ballard, and Ballard doesn't come at the expense of those parts of the region because of something called sub-area equity, which is a value not from me, but from the voters. The voters said revenue generated in one area has to be used for stations in that area. So Ballard did not get deferred because of Snohomish County and Pierce County. It got deferred because of unaffordability within the North King County area. So if you want to think about what comes at the expense of what, West Seattle might come at the expense of Ballard. Graham Street might come at the expense of Ballard. So that affordability is found within the common sub-area, not those places outside of the region, which is a concept that I keep trying to explain. And for some reason, they keep going back and saying, oh my God, Pierce and Snohomish got everything they wanted and North King County did, like that. There are reasons for that.
Is it reasonable for voters to assume that future cost savings will be enough to salvage Ballard?
I'm 100% committed to delivering on Ballard. So for everybody who believe, absolutely 100, what I want people to take away from the vote last week is that we worked really hard to get 100% of the design money to get to 100% design. That means for the next 4 or 5 years, all of the work that would have happened, even if we voted to get to Market Street last week, all that's the exact same work is going to be happening for the next 4 to 5 years, which means designing all the way up to market, finding the cost savings, then finding a way to deliver in the next few years. We have to go lobby the state government to give us that 75-year bond bill and beyond. We have to find new revenue. We have to figure out how to do new cost sharing for regional assets like the second downtown tunnel. I think we're going to get there. It's going to be really hard work, but you have the commitment of your county executive who appoints 10 out of the 18 board seats, by the way. So we're going to do it. We're going to work together and we're going to do it.
All right. Well, I am glad you brought up the board because there have been calls to reform the Sound Transit Board, including a new ballot initiative. Is it time to re-examine the structure of the agency?
I'm open to any ideas that will deliver stations and mobility for our community. So if somebody has a novel idea that would actually do that, I'm all on board. I would ask the people who are calling for a board that is composed of transit experts, what is the difference between that and the transit experts who work at Sound Transit right now? If your view is we aren't listening to the Sound Transit experts who work at Sound Transit, show me what recommendation they made that this board did not adopt with respect to this balancing package. Because we have transit experts, we have engineers. What have they said about delivering for Ballard that the board did not accept? They were the ones who told us that some of the amendments that came through were not workable. Those were transit experts who said that.
How should people feel, though, about all these realignments and the restructuring of everything? It's difficult to be a voter who believed in this and then have this happen again. How should people feel about this latest vote?
Frustrated, and they should feel like this is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. I think that if you are going to see a $35 billion deficit, I think it's right to say, why didn't we see that coming for the past, several years? I think it's right to say, why are other places in the world able to deliver big mega capital projects far more efficiently and quickly than jurisdictions in the United States? There are many reasons for that, and we have to work together to change those factors.
Where can you apply the pressure?
Every single level of government has a role in this, and we have to work together. And that's what I'm going to be doing, is bringing together a coalition of people at the state, at the city, at the county, regional partners, private sector, to really solve these problems.
You have said you want King County to be the most efficient and well-run in the country, that every dollar needs to be used to its highest potential. What kind of changes have you made to get closer to that goal, and how will you measure that progress?
I put out a better government executive order within my first couple months in office, and that was to hold our government accountable to what you just talked about, being the highest performing and best run local government in the nation. That is my North Star, so that we can deliver services, save lives, make people's lives better in King County. And we do that through some of the things that I talked about before, being accountable to performance metrics, saying that we're going to measure our success not based on how much money we spend or how many new programs we launch, but how many problems did we actually solve? How many people were moved off of the street and into housing? How much carbon did we remove from the air? How many service hours on our buses did we expand? And then holding ourselves accountable through internal audit directors, through base budgeting, like I talked about before, through releasing quarterly reports about the progress that we made so that we're transparent about how your tax dollars are being used to produce key metrics. Those are all things that we're going to do better to hold ourselves accountable and be the best run government in the nation.
King County Executive Girmay Zahilay, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Why not take a moment to rate the show or share it with a friend? Today's episode was produced by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Big thanks to the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival. Our production team includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, Vaughn Jones, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.